The Pilgrim's Progress, Part 1, Chapter 5. The Pilgrim's Progress, by John Bunyan, Part 1, Chapter 5. Now, as Christian went on his way, he came to a little ascent which was cast up on purpose that pilgrims might see before them. Up there, therefore, Christian went, and looking forward he saw Faithful before him upon his journey. Then said Christian aloud,
"Ho, ho, so ho! Stay, and I will be your companion."
At that Faithful looked behind him, to whom Christian cried,
"Stay, stay, till I come up to you."
But Faithful answered,
"No, I am upon my life, and the avenger of blood is behind me."
At this Christian was somewhat moved, and putting to all his strength, he quickly got up with Faithful, and did also overrun him, so the last was first. Then did Christian boastfully smile, because he had gotten the start of his brother, but not taking good heed to his feet, he suddenly stumbled and fell, and could not rise again until Faithful came up to help him. Then I saw in my dream they went very lovingly on together, and had sweet talk together of all things that had happened to them in their pilgrimage, and thus Christian began,
"My honoured and well-beloved brother Faithful, I am glad that I have overtaken you, and that God has so tempered our spirits that we can walk as companions in this so pleasant a path."
"I had thought, dear friend, to have had your company quite from our town, but you did get the start of me, wherefore I was forced to come thus much of the way alone."
"How long did you stay in the city of destruction before you set out after me on your pilgrimage?"
"Till I could stay no longer, for there was great talk, presently after you were gone out, that our city would, in a short time, with fire from heaven, be burned down to the ground."
"What? Did your neighbours talk so?"
"Yes, it was for a while in everybody's mouth."
"What? And did no more of them but you come out to escape the danger?"
"Though there was, as I said, a great talk thereabout, yet I do not think they did firmly believe it. For in the heat of the talking I heard some of them deridingly speak of you, and of your desperate journey, for so they called this your pilgrimage. But I did believe, and do still, that the end of our city will be with fire and brimstone from above, and therefore I have made my escape."
"Did you hear no talk of neighbour Pliable?"
"Yes, Christian, I heard that he followed you till he came to the Slough of Despond, where, as some said, he fell in. But he would not be known to have so done, but I am sure he was soundly bedabbled with that kind of dirt."
"And what said the neighbours to him?"
"He had, since his going back, been held greatly in derision, and that among all sorts of people. Some do mock and despise him, and scarce any will set him on work. He is now 7 times worse than if he had never gone out of the city."
"But why should they be so set against him, since they also despise the way that he forsook?"
"Oh," they say, "hang him! He is a turncoat. He was not true to his profession." I think God has stirred up even his enemies to hiss at him and laugh at him, because he hath forsaken the way.
"Had you no talk with him before you came out?"
"I met him once in the streets, but he leered away on the other side, as one ashamed of what he had done, so I spake not to him."
"Well, at my first setting out I had hopes of that man, but now I fear he will perish in the overthrow of the city, for it has happened to him according to the true proverb, the dog is turned to his vomit again, and the sow that was washed to her wallowing in the mire."
"These are my fears of him too, but who can hinder that which will be?"
"Well, neighbour Faithful,"
said Christian,
"let us leave him, and talk of things that more immediately concern ourselves. Tell me now what you have met with in the way as you came, for I know that you have met with some things, or else it may be writ for a wonder."
"I escaped the slough that I perceive you fell into, and got up to the gate without that danger. Only I met with one whose name is Wanton, that had like to have done me a mischief."
"It was well you escaped her net. Joseph was hard put to it by her, and he escaped her as you did, but it had like to have cost him his life. But what did she do to you?"
"You cannot think but that you know something. What a flattering tongue she had! She lay at me hard to turn aside with her, promising me all manner of enjoyment.
Nay, she did not promise you the enjoyment of a good conscience.
You know what I mean. Not the enjoyment of the soul, but of the body.
Thank God you have escaped her. The abhorred of the Lord shall fall into her ditch.
Nay, I do not know whether I did wholly escape her or no.
Why, I suppose you did not consent to her desires?
No, not to defile myself, for I remembered an old writing that I had seen which saith, Her steps take hold of hell. So I shut mine eyes, because I would not be bewitched with her looks. Then she railed on me, and I went my way.
Did you meet with no other assault as you came?
When I came to the foot of the hill called Difficulty, I met with a very aged man, who asked me what I was and whither bound. I told him that I was a pilgrim, going to the celestial city. Then said the old man, Thou lookest like an honest fellow. Wilt thou be content to dwell with me, for the wages that I shall give thee? Then I asked him his name, and where he dwelt. He said his name was Adam the First, and that he dwelt in the town of Deceit. I asked him then what was his work, and what the wages that he would give. He told me that his work was many delights, and his wages, that I should be his heir at last. I further asked him what house he kept, and what other servants he had. So he told me that his house was filled with all the dainties of the world, and that his servants were his own children. Then I asked him how many children he had. He said that he had but 3 daughters, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, and that I should marry them if I would. Then I asked how long time he would have me live with him, and he told me, as long as he lived himself.
Well, and what conclusion came the old man and you to at the last?
Why, at first I found myself somewhat inclinable to go with the man, for I thought he spake very fair. But looking in his forehead, as I talked with him, I saw there written, Put off the old man with his deeds.
And how then?
Then it came burning hot into my mind, whatever he said, and however he flattered. When he got home to his house, he would sell me for a slave. So I bid him forbear, for I would not come near the door of his house. Then he reviled me, and told me that he would send such a one after me that should make my way bitter to my soul. So I turned to go away from him, but just as I turned myself to go thence, I felt him take hold of my flesh, and give me such a deadly twitch back, that I thought he had pulled part of me after himself. This made me cry, O wretched man! So I went up on my way up the hill. Now, when I had got about halfway up, I looked behind me, and saw one coming after me, swift as the wind. So he overtook me just about the place where the settle stands.
Just there,
said Christian.
did I sit down to rest me, but being overcome with sleep, I there lost this roll out of my bosom.
But, good brother, hear me out. So soon as the man overtook me, he was but a word and a blow, for down he knocked me, and laid me for dead. But, when I was a little come to myself again, I asked him wherefore he served me so. He said, because of my secret inclining to Adam the First. And, with that, he struck me another deadly blow on the breast, and beat me down backwards, so I lay at his feet as dead as before. So when I came to myself again, I cried him mercy, but he said, I know not how to show mercy. And with that he knocked me down again. He had doubtless made an end of me, but that one came by and bid him forbear.
Who was that bid him forbear?
I did not know him at first, but as he went by, I perceived the holes in his hands and his side. Then I concluded that he was our Lord. So I went up the hill.
That man that overtook you was Moses. He spareth none, neither knoweth he how to show mercy to those that disobey his law.
I know it very well. It was not the first time that he has met with me. It was he that came to me when I dwelt securely at home, and that told me he would burn my house over my head if I stayed there.
But did you not see the house that stood there, on the top of the hill, on the side of which Moses met you?
Yes, and the lions too, before I came at it. But for the lions, I think they were asleep, for it was about noon, and because I had so much of the day before me, I passed by the porter, and came down the hill.
He told me indeed that he saw you go by, but I wished you had called at the house, for they would have showed you so many rarities that you would scarce have forgot them to the day of your death. But pray tell me, did you meet nobody in the Valley of Humility?
Yes, I met with one discontent, who would willingly have persuaded me to go back again with him. His reason was, for that the valley was altogether without honor. He told me, moreover, that there to go was the way to disoblige all my friends, as pride, arrogancy, self-conceit, worldly glory, with others, who he knew, as he said, would be very much offended if I had made such a fool of myself as to wade through this valley.
Well, and how did you answer him?
I told him that, although all these that he named might claim kindred of me, and that rightly, for indeed they were my relations according to the flesh, yet, since I became a pilgrim, they have disowned me, as I also have rejected them, and therefore they were to me now no more than if they had never been of my lineage. I told him, moreover, that as to this valley, he had quite misrepresented the thing, for before honor is humility, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Therefore, said I had rather go through this valley to the honor that was so accounted by the wisest, than choose that which he esteemed most worthy of our affections.
Met you with nothing else in that valley?
Yes, I met with shame, but of all the men that I met with in my pilgrimage, he, I think, bears the wrong name. The others would take no for an answer, at least after some words of denial, but this bold-faced shame would never have done.
Why, what did he say to you?
What? Why, he objected against religion itself. He said it was pitiful, low, sneaking business for a man to mind religion. He said that a tender conscience was an unmanly thing, and that for a man to watch over his words and ways, so as to tie himself from that liberty that the brave spirits of the times accustomed themselves unto, would make him the ridicule of all the people in our time. He objected also, that but a few of the mighty, rich or wise, were ever of my opinion, nor any of them neither, before they were persuaded to be fools, to venture the loss of all for nobody else knows what. He, moreover, objected the base and low estate and condition of those that were chiefly the pilgrims of the times in which they had lived, also their ignorance, and want of understanding and all worldly knowledge. Yea, he did hold me to it at that rate also, about a great many more things than here I relate, as that it was a shame to sit whining and mourning under a sermon, and a shame to come sighing and groaning home, that it was a shame to ask my neighbor forgiveness for petty faults, or to give back what I had taken from any. He said also that religion made a man grow strange to the great, because of a few vices, which he called by finer names, and because religion made him own and respect the base, who were of the same religious company. And is not this, said he, a shame?
And what did you say to him?
Say? I could not tell what to say at first. Yea, he put me so to it that my blood came up in my face. Even this shame fetched it up, and had almost beat me quite off. But at last I began to consider that which is highly esteemed among men is had in an abomination with God. And I thought again, this shame tells me what men are, but it tells me nothing what God or the word of God is. And I thought, moreover, that at the day of doom we shall not be doomed to death or life according to the spirits of the world, but according to the wisdom and law of the highest. Therefore, thought I, what God says is best, though all the men in the world are against it. Seeing then that God prefers his religion, seeing God prefers a tender conscience, seeing that they make themselves fools for the kingdom of heaven are wisest, and that the poor man that loveth Christ is richer than the greatest man in the world that hates him. Shame, depart! Thou art an enemy to my salvation. Shall I listen to thee against my sovereign Lord? How then shall I look at him in the face at his coming? Should I now be ashamed of his vain servants, how can I expect a blessing? But indeed, this shame was a bold villain. I could scarce shake him out of my company. Yea, he would be haunting of me, and continually whispering me in the ear with some one or other of the weak things that attend religion. But at last I told him it was in vain to attempt further in this business, for those things that he despised, in those did I see most glory, and so at last I got past this persistent one, and when I had shaken him off, then I began to sing. The trials that those men do meet withal, that are obedient to the heavenly call, are manifold and suited to the flesh, and come and come and come again afresh, that now or sometime else we by them may be taken, overcome, and cast away. Oh, let the pilgrims then be vigilant and quit themselves like men.
I am glad, my brother, that thou didst withstand this villain so bravely. For of all, as thou sayest, I think he has the wrong name, for he is so bold as to follow us in the streets, and to attempt to put us to shame before all men, that is, to make us ashamed of that which is good. But if he was not himself bold, he would never attempt to do as he does. But let us still resist him, for notwithstanding all his bold words, he promoteth the fool and none else. The wise shall inherit glory, said Solomon, but shame shall be the promotion of fools.
I think we must cry to him for help against shame, who would have us to be valiant for truth upon the earth.
You say true, but did you meet nobody else in that valley?
No, not I, for I had sunshine all the rest of the way through that, and also through the valley of the shadow of death.
It was well for you. I am sure it fared far otherwise with me. I had for a long season, as soon almost as I entered into that valley, a dreadful combat with that foul fiend Apollyon. Yea, I thought verily he would have killed me, especially when he got me down and crushed me under him, as if he would have crushed me to pieces. For as he threw me, my sword flew out of my hand. Nay, he told me he was sure of me, and I cried to God, and he heard me, and delivered me out of all my troubles. Then I entered into the valley of the shadow of death, and had no light for almost half the way through it. I thought I should have been killed there over and over, but at last day broke, and the sun rose, and I went through that which was behind with far more ease and quiet.
Moreover, I saw in my dream that, as they went on, Faithful, as he chanced to look on one side, saw a man, whose name is Talkative, walking at a distance beside them. For in this place there was room enough for them all to walk. He was a tall man, and something better looking at a distance than near at hand. To this man Faithful spoke himself in this manner.
Friend, whither away? Are you going to the heavenly country?
I am going to that same place.
That is well. Then I hope we may have your good company.
With a very good will I be your companion?
Come on, then, and let us go together, and let us spend our time in talking of things that are profitable.
To talk of things that are good to me is very acceptable, with you or with any other, and I am glad that I have met with those that incline to so good a work. For, to speak the truth, there are but few who care thus to spend their time as they are in their travels, but choose much rather to be speaking of things to no profit, and this has been a trouble to me.
That is indeed a thing to be lamented, for what things so worthy of the use of the tongue and mouth of men on earth, as are the things of the God of heaven?
I like you wonderfully well, for your saying is full of the truth, and I will add, what thing is so pleasant, and what so profitable, as to talk of the things of God? What thing so pleasant? That is, if a man hath any delight in things that are wonderful. For instance, if a man doth delight to talk of the history or the mystery of things, or if a man doth love to talk of miracles, wonders, or signs, where shall he find things written so delightful or so sweetly penned as in the Holy Scripture?
That's true, but to be profited by such things in our talk should be that which we design.
That is it that I said, for to talk of such things is most profitable. For by doing so a man may get knowledge of many things. as of the folly of earthly things and the benefit of things above. Besides, by this a man may learn what it is to turn from sin, to believe, to pray, to suffer, or the like. By this also a man may learn what are the great promises and comforts of the gospel, to his own enjoyment. Further, by this a man may learn to answer false opinions, to prove the truth, and also to teach the ignorant.
All this is true, and glad am I to hear these things from you.
Alas! The want of this is the cause that so few understand the need of faith and the necessity of a work of grace in their soul, in order to eternal life.
But by your leave, heavenly knowledge of these is the gift of God. No man attaineth to them by human working, or only by the talk of them.
All that I know very well, for a man can receive nothing except it be given him from heaven. I could give you 100 scriptures for the confirmation of this.
Well then,
said Faithful,
what is that one thing that we shall at this time found our talk upon?
What you will. I will talk of things heavenly or things earthly, things in life or things in the gospel, things sacred or things worldly, things past or things to come, things foreign or things at home, things necessary or things accidental, provided that all be done to our profit.
Now did Faithful begin to wonder, and stepping to Christian, for he walked all this while by himself, he said to him, but softly,
What a brave companion have we got! Surely this man will make a very excellent pilgrim.
At this Christian modestly smiled, and said,
This man with whom you are so taken will deceive with this tongue of his 20 of them that know him not.
Do you know him then?
Know him? Yes, better than he knows himself.
Pray, what is he?
His name is Talkative. He dwelleth in our town. I wondered that you should be a stranger to him, only I consider that our town is large.
Whose son is he, and whereabout doth he dwell?
He is the son of one Saywell. He dwelt in Prating Row, and is known to all that are acquainted with him by the name of Talkative of Prating Row, and notwithstanding his fine tongue, he is but a sorry fellow.
Well, he seems to be a very pretty man.
That is, to them that have not a thorough acquaintance with him, for he is best abroad. Near home he is ugly enough. Your saying that he is a pretty man brings to my mind what I have observed in the work of the painter, whose pictures show best at a distance, but very near more unpleasing.
But I am ready to think you do but jest, because you smiled.
God forbid that I should jest, though I smiled in this matter, or that I should accuse any falsely. I will give you a further discovery of him. This man is for any company and for any talk. As he talketh now with you, so will he talk when he is on the ale-bench. And the more drink he hath in his crown, the more of these things he hath in his mouth. Religion hath no place in his heart, or house, or conversation. All that he hath lieth in his tongue, and his religion is to make a noise therewith.
Say you so? Then am I in this man greatly deceived.
Deceived, you may be sure of it. Remember the proverb, they say and do not. But the kingdom of God is not in word, but in power. He talketh of prayer, of turning to God, of faith, and of the new birth, but he knows but only to talk of them. I have been in his family, and have seen him both at home and abroad, and I know what I say of him is the truth. His house is as empty of religion as the white of an egg is of savour. There is there neither prayer nor sign of turning from sin, yea, the brute, in his kind, serves God far better than he. He is the very stain, reproach, and shame of religion to all that know him. It can hardly have a good word in all that end of the town where he dwells through him. Thus say the common people that know him, a saint abroad and a devil at home. His poor family finds it so. He is such a fault-finder, such a railer at, and so unreasonable with his servants, that they neither know how to do for or to speak to him. Men that have any dealings with him say it is better to deal with a Turk than with him, for fairer dealing they shall have at their hands. This talkative, if it be possible, will go beyond them, cheat, beguile, and overreach them. Besides, he brings up his sons to follow his steps. And if he findeth in any of them a foolish timorousness, for so he calls the first appearance of a tender conscience, he calls them fools and blockheads, and by no means will employ them in much, or speak to their commendation before others. For my part, I am of the opinion that he has, by his wicked life, caused many to stumble and fall, and will be, if God prevent it not, the ruin of many more.
Well, my brother, I am bound to believe you, not only because you say you know him, but also because, like a Christian, you make your reports of men. For I cannot think you speak these things of ill will, but because it is even so as you say.
Had I known him no more than you, I might perhaps have thought of him as at first you did. Yea, had he received this report only from those that are enemies to religion, I should have thought it had been a slander, a lot that often falls from bad men's mouths upon good men's names and professions. But all these things, yea, and a great many more as bad of my own knowledge, I can prove him guilty of. Besides, good men are ashamed of him. They can neither call him brother nor friend. The very naming of him among them makes them blush if they know him.
Well, I see that saying and doing are two things, and hereafter I shall better observe the difference between them.
They are two things indeed, and are as diverse as are the soul and the body. For as the body without the soul is but a dead carcass, so saying, if it be alone, is but a dead carcass also. The soul of religion is the practical part. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. This talkative is not aware of. He thinks that hearing and saying will make a good Christian, and thus he deceiveth his own soul. Hearing is but as the sowing of the seed. Talking is not sufficient to prove that fruit is indeed in the heart and life. Let us assure ourselves that at the day of doom men shall be judged according to their fruits.
Well, I was not so fond of his company at first, but I am as sick of it now. What shall we do to be rid of him?
Take my advice and do as I bid you, and you shall find that he will soon be sick of your company too, except God shall touch his heart and turn it.
What would you have me to do?
Why, go to him, and enter into some serious conversation about the power of religion, and ask him plainly, when he has approved of it, for that he will, whether this thing be set up in his heart, house, or conduct.
Then the faithful stepped forward again, and said to talkative,
Come, what cheer? How is it now?
Thank you well. I thought we should have had a great deal of talk by this time.
Well, if you will, we will fall to it now, and since you left it with me to state the question, let it be this: how doth the saving grace of God show itself when it is in the heart of man?
I perceive, then, that our talk must be about the powers of things. Well, it is a very good question, and I shall be willing to answer you, and take my answer in brief thus. First, where the grace of God is in the heart, it causeth there a great outcry against sin. Secondly—
Nay, hold, let us consider of one at once. I think you should rather say, it shows itself by inclining the soul to hate its sin.
Why, what difference is there between crying out against and hating sin?
Oh, a great deal. A man may cry out against sin in order to appear good, but he cannot hate it except by a real dislike for it. I have heard many cry out against sin in the pulpit, who yet can abide it well enough in the heart, house, and life. Some cry out against sin, even as the mother cries out against her child in her lap, when she calleth it a naughty girl, and then falls to hugging it and kissing it.
You are trying to catch me, I perceive.
No, not I. I am only for setting things right. But what is the second thing whereby you would prove a discovery of a work of God in the heart?
Great knowledge of hard things in the Bible.
This sign should have been first, but first or last it is also false. For knowledge, great knowledge, may be obtained in the mysteries of the gospel, and yet no work of grace in the soul. Yea, if a man have all knowledge, he may yet be nothing, and so consequently be no child of God. When Christ said, Do ye know all these things? And the disciples had answered, Yes, he added, Blessed are ye if ye do them. He doth not lay the blessing in the knowledge of them, but in the doing of them. For there is a knowledge that is not attended with doing. He that knoweth his master's will, and doeth it not. A man may know like an angel, and yet be no Christian. Therefore your sign of it is not true. Indeed, to know is a thing that pleaseth talkers and boasters, but to do is that which pleaseth God.
You are trying to catch me again. This is not profitable.
Well, if you please, name another sign of how this work of grace showeth itself where it is.
Nor I, for I see we shall not agree.
Well, if you will not, will you give me leave to do it?
You may say what you please.
God's work in the soul showeth itself either to him that hath it, or to standers by. To him that has it, it is shown by making him see and feel his own sins. To others who are standing by it is shown by his life, a life of doing right in the sight of God. And now, sir, as to this brief account of the work of grace, and also the showing of it, if you have aught to object, object. If not, then give me leave to ask you a second question.
Nay, my part is not now to object, but to hear. Let me, therefore, have your second question.
It is this. Have you felt your own sins, and have you turned from them? And do your life and conduct show it the same? Or is your religion in word or in tongue, and not in deed and truth? Pray, if you incline to answer me in this, and say no more than you know the God above will say amen to, and also nothing but what your conscience can approve you in. For not he that commendeth himself is approved, but whom the Lord commendeth. Besides, to say I am thus and thus, when my conduct and all my neighbors tell me I lie, is great wickedness.
Then Talkative at first began to blush, but recovering himself, thus he replied,
The kind of discourse I did not expect. Nor am I disposed to give an answer to such questions, because I count not myself bound thereto, unless you take upon you to be a questioner. And though you should do so, yet I may refuse to make you my judge. But I pray, will you tell me why you ask me such questions?
Because I saw you forward to talk, and because I knew not that you had aught else but notion. Besides, to tell you all the truth, I have heard of you that you are a man whose religion lies in talk, and that your life gives this your mouth profession to lie. They say you are a spot among Christians, and that religion fareth the worse for your ungodly conduct, that some have already stumbled at your wicked ways, and that more are in danger of being destroyed thereby. Your religion, and an alehouse, and greed for gain, and uncleanness, and swearing, and lying, and vain company keeping, etc., will stand together. You are a shame to all who are members of the church.
Since you are ready to take up reports, and to judge so rashly as you do, I cannot but conclude you are some peevish or cross man, not fit to be talked with, and so adieu.
Then up came Christian, and said to his brother,
I told you how it would happen. Your words and his heart could not agree. He had rather leave your company than reform his life. But he is gone, as I said. Let him go. The loss is no man's but his own. He has saved us the trouble of going from him, for he, continuing as I suppose he will do, as he is, he would have been but a blot on our company. Besides, the apostle says, From such withdraw thyself.
But I am glad we had this little talk with him. It may happen that he will think of it again. However, I have dealt plainly with him, and so am clear of his blood, if he perisheth.
You did well to talk so plainly to him as you did. There is but little of this faithful dealing with men nowadays, and that makes religion to be despised by so many, for they are these talkative fools whose religion is only in word, and are vile and vain in their life, that being so much admitted into the fellowship of the godly, do puzzle the world, blemish Christianity, and grieve the sincere. I wish that all men would deal with such as you have done. Then should they either be made more suitable to religion, or the company of saints would be too hot for them.
Then did Faithful say,
How talkative at first lifts up his plumes! How bravely doth he speak, how he presumes to drive down all before him but so soon, as Faithful talks of hard work like the moon, that's past the full into the wane he goes, and so will all but he who hard work knows.
Thus they went on, talking of what they had seen by the way, and so made that way easy which would otherwise, no doubt, have been tedious to them. For now they went through a wilderness. End of Part 1, Chapter 5. The Pilgrim's Progress, Part 1, Chapter 6. The Pilgrim's Progress, by John Bunyan, Part 1, Chapter 6. Now, when they were got almost quite out of this wilderness, Faithful chanced to cast his eye back, and espied one coming after him, and he knew him.
"Oh,"
said Faithful to his brother,
"what comes yonder?"
Then Christian looked, and said,
"It is my good friend Evangelist."
"Ay, and my good friend too,"
said Faithful.
"for it was he that set me the way to the gate."
Now was Evangelist come up unto them, and thus saluted them.
"Peace be with you, dearly beloved, and peace be to your helpers."
"Welcome, welcome, my good Evangelist. The sight of thy face brings to my thought thy former kindness, and unwearied labouring for my eternal good."
"And 1,000 times welcome,"
said good Faithful.
"Thy company, O sweet Evangelist, how desirable it is to us poor pilgrims."
Then said Evangelist,
"How hath it fared with you, my friends, since the time of our last parting? What have you met with, and how have you behaved yourselves?"
Then Christian and Faithful told him of all things that had happened to them in the way, and how and with what difficulty they had arrived to that place.
"Right glad am I,"
said Evangelist,
"not that you met with trials, but that you have been victors, and for that you have, notwithstanding many weaknesses, continued in the way to this very day. I say, right glad am I of this thing, and that for my own sake and yours. I have sowed, and you have reaped, and the day is coming when both he that sowed and they that reaped shall rejoice together. That is, if you faint not. The crown is before you, and it is an incorruptible one, so run that you may obtain it. Some there be that set out for this crown, and after they have gone far for it, another comes in and takes it from them. Hold fast, therefore, that you have. Let no man take your crown."
Then Christian thanked him for his words, but told him withal that they would have him speak further to them, for their help the rest of the way, and the rather, for that they well knew that he was a prophet, and could tell them of things that might happen unto them, and also how they might resist and overcome them. To which request Faithful also consented. So Evangelist began as followeth.
"My sons, you have heard, in the words of the truth of the gospel, that you must, through many trials, enter into the kingdom of heaven. And again, that in every city bonds and afflictions await you, and therefore you cannot expect that you should go long on your pilgrimage without them in some sort or other. You have found something of the truth of these words upon you already, and more will immediately follow. For now, as you see, you are almost out of this wilderness, and therefore you will soon come into a town that you will by and by see before you, and in that town you will be hardly beset with enemies who will strain hard, but they will kill you. And be you sure that one or both of you must seal the truth which you hold with blood, but be you faithful unto death, and the king will give you a crown of life. He that shall die there, though his death will be unnatural, and his pain perhaps great, he will yet have the better of his fellow, not only because he will be arrived at the celestial city soonest, but because he will escape many miseries that the other will meet with in the rest of his journey. But when you are come to the town, and shall find fulfilled what I have here related, then remember your friend, and quit yourselves like men, and commit the keeping of your souls to God in well-doing, as unto a faithful Creator."
Then I saw in my dream that, when they were got out of the wilderness, they presently saw a town before them, and the name of that town is Vanity, and at that town there is a fair kept, called Vanity Fair. It is kept all the year long. It beareth the name of Vanity Fair, because the town where it is kept is lighter than vanity, and also because all that is there sold, or that cometh thither, is vanity, as is the saying of the wise, all that cometh is vanity. This is no newly begun business, but a thing of ancient standing. I will show you the original of it. Almost 5,000 years ago there were pilgrims walking to the celestial city as these two honest persons are, and Beelzebub, Apollyon, and Legion, with their companions, perceiving by the path that the pilgrims made that their way to the city lay through this town of vanity, they contrived here to set up a fair wherein should be sold all sorts of vanity, and that it should last all the year long. Therefore at this fair are all such things sold as houses, lands, trades, places, honours, preferments, titles, countries, kingdoms, lusts, pleasures, and delights of all sorts, as wives, husbands, children, masters, servants, lives, blood, bodies, souls, silver, gold, pearls, precious stones, and what not. And, moreover, at this fair there are at all times to be seen jugglings, cheats, games, plays, fools, apes, knaves, and rogues, and that of every kind. Here are to be seen too, and that for nothing, thefts, murders, false swearers, and that of a blood-red colour. And, as in other fairs of less moment, there are several rows and streets under their proper names, where such and such wares are vended. So here, likewise, you have the proper places, rows, streets, namely countries and kingdoms, where the wares of this fair are soonest to be found. Here are the Britain row, the French row, the Italian row, the Spanish row, the German row, where several sorts of vanities are to be sold. But, as in other fairs, some one commodity is as the chief of all the fair, so the ware of Rome and her goods are greatly promoted in this fair. Only our English nation, with some others, have taken dislike thereat. Now, as I said, the way to the celestial city lies just through this town, where this lusty fair is kept, and he that would go to the city, and yet not go through this town, must needs go out of the world. The Prince of Princes himself, when here, went through this town to his own country, and that upon a fair day too. Yea, and as I think, it was Beelzebub, the chief lord of this fair, that invited him to buy of his vanities. Yea, would have made him lord of the fair, would he but have done him reverence as he went through the town. Yea, because he was such a person of honour, Beelzebub had him from street to street, and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a little time, that he might, if possible, allure that blessed one to ask for and buy some of his vanities. But he had no mind to the merchandise, and therefore left the town without laying out so much as 1 farthing upon these vanities. This fair, therefore, is an ancient thing of long standing, and a very great fair. Now these pilgrims, as I said, must needs go through this fair. Well, so they did. But behold, even as they entered into the fair, all the people in the fair were moved, and the town itself, as it were, in a hubbub about them, and that for several reasons. First, the pilgrims were clothed with such kind of garments as were different from the raiment of any that traded in that fair. The people, therefore, of the fair made a great gazing upon them. Some said they were fools, some they were bedlams, and some they were outlandish men. Secondly, and as they wondered at their apparel, so they did likewise at their speech, for few could understand what they said. They naturally spoke the language of Canaan, but they that kept the fair were men of this world, so that from one end of the fair to the other they seemed barbarians each to the other. Thirdly, but that which did not a little amuse the storekeepers was that these pilgrims set very light by all their wares. They cared not so much as to look upon them, and if they called upon them to buy, they would put their fingers in their ears and cry,
"Turn away mine eyes from beholding vanity,"
and look upwards, signifying that their trade and traffic were in heaven. One chanced, mockingly, beholding the actions of the men, to say unto them,
What will you buy?
But they, looking gravely upon him, said,
We buy the truth.
At that there was an occasion taken to despise the men the more, some mocking, some taunting, some speaking reproachfully, and some calling on others to smite them. At last things came to a hubbub and great stir in the fair, insomuch that all order was confounded. Now was the word presently brought to the great one of the fair, who quickly came down and deputed some of his most trusty friends to take these men for trial, about whom the fair was almost overturned. So the men were brought to trial, and they that sat upon them asked them whence they came, whither they went, and what they did there in such unusual garb. The men told them that they were pilgrims and strangers in the world, and that they were going to their own country, which was the heavenly Jerusalem, and that they had given no occasion to the men of the town, nor yet to the merchants, thus to abuse them, and to hinder them in their journey, except it was for that, when one asked them what they would buy, they said they would buy the truth. But they that were appointed to examine them did not believe them to be any other than crazy people and mad, or else such as came to put all things into a confusion in the fair. Therefore they took them and beat them, and besmeared them with dirt, and then put them into the cage, that they might be made a spectacle to all the men of the fair. There, therefore, they lay for some time, and were made the objects of any man's sport, or malice, or revenge, the great one of the fair laughing still at all that befell them. But the men being patient, and not rendering railing for railing, but contrariwise blessing, and giving good words for bad, and kindness for injuries done, some men in the fair that were more observing and less opposed than the rest began to check and blame the baser sort for their continual abuses done by them to the men. They therefore in an angry manner let fly at them again, counting them as bad as the men in the cage, and telling them that they seemed to be in league with them, and should be made partakers of their misfortunes. The others replied that, for aught they could see, the men were quiet and sober, and intended nobody any harm, and that there were many that traded in their fair that were more worthy to be put into the cage, yea, and pilloried too, than were the men that they had abused. Thus, after divers words had passed on both sides, the men behaving themselves all the while very wisely and soberly before them, they fell to some blows, and did harm to one another. Then were these two poor men brought before the court again, and there charged as being guilty of the late hubbub that had been in the fair. So they beat them pitifully, and hanged irons upon them, and led them in chains up and down the fair, for an example and terror to others, lest any should speak in their behalf, or join themselves unto them. But Christian and Faithful behaved themselves yet more wisely, and received the wrongs and shame that were cast upon them with so much meekness and patience, that it won to their side, though but few in comparison of the rest, several of the men in the fair. This put the other party in yet a greater rage, insomuch that they resolved upon the death of these two men. Wherefore they threatened that neither cage nor irons should serve their turn, but that they should die for the abuse they had done, and for deceiving the men of the fair. Then they were remanded to the cage again, until further order should be taken with them. So they put them in, and made their feet fast in the stocks. Here, therefore, they called again to mind what they had heard from their faithful friend Evangelist, and were more confirmed in their way and sufferings by what he told them would happen to them. They also now comforted each other that whose lot it was to suffer, even he should have the best of it. Therefore each man secretly wished he might have that privilege, but committing themselves to the all-wise disposal of him that ruleth all things, with much content they abode in the condition in which they were, until they should be otherwise disposed of. Then, a convenient time being appointed, they brought them forth to their trial, in order to their being condemned. When the time was come, they were brought before their enemies, and placed on trial. The judge's name was Lord Hategood. The charges against both were one and the same in substance, though somewhat varying in form. The contents whereof were this:
that they were enemies to and disturbers of their trade, that they had made riots and divisions in the town, and had won a party to their own most dangerous opinions, in contempt of the law of their prince.
Then Faithful began to answer, that he had only set himself against that which had set itself against him that is higher than the highest.
And,
said he,
as for disturbances, I make none, being myself a man of peace. The parties that were won to us were won by beholding our truth and innocence, and they are only turned from the worse to the better. And as to the king you talk of, since he is Beelzebub, the enemy of our Lord, I defy him and all his angels.
Then it was made known that they that had aught to say for their lord the king against the prisoner at the bar should forthwith appear and give in their evidence. So there came in 3 witnesses, to wit, Envy, Superstition, and Pickthank. They were then asked if they knew the prisoner at the bar, and what they had to say for their lord the king against him. Then stood forth Envy, and said to this effect:
My lord, I have known this man a long time, and will attest upon my oath before this honourable bench that he is—
Hold, give him his oath.
So they swear him. Then said he,
My lord, this man, notwithstanding his name, Faithful, is one of the vilest men in our country. He cares for neither prince nor people, law nor custom, but doth all that he can to possess all men with certain of his disloyal notions, which he in the general calls principles of faith and holiness. And in particular, I heard him once myself affirm that Christianity and the customs of our town of vanity were opposites, and could not be reconciled. By which saying, my lord, he doth at once not only condemn all our laudable doings, but us in the doing of them.
Then did the judge say to him,
Hast thou any more to say?
My lord, I could say much more, only I would not be tiresome to the court. Yet, if need be, when the other gentlemen have given in their evidence, rather than anything shall be wanting, that I will dispatch him, I will have more to speak against him.
So he was bid stand by. Then they called Superstition, and bade him look upon the prisoner. They also asked what he could say for their lord the king against him. Then they sware him. So he began,
My lord, I have no great acquaintance with this man, nor do I desire to have further knowledge of him. However, this I know, that he is a very pestilent fellow, from some discourse the other day that I had with him in this town. For then, talking with him, I heard him say that our religion was marked, and such by which a man could by no means please God. Which saying of his, my lord, your lordship very well knows what necessarily thence will follow, to wit, that we still do worship in vain, are yet in our sins, and finally shall be destroyed. And this is that what I have to say.
Then was Pickthank sworn, and bid say what he knew, in behalf of their lord the king, against the prisoner at the bar.
My lord, and you gentlemen all, this fellow I have known a long time, and have heard him speak things that ought not to be spoken, for he hath railed on our noble prince Beelzebub, and hath spoken contemptuously of his honourable friends, whose names are the Lord Old Man, the Lord Carnal Delight, the Lord Luxurious, the Lord Desire of Vainglory, my old Lord Lust, Sir Having Greedy, with all the rest of our nobility, and he hath said, moreover, that if all men were of his mind, if possible, there is not one of these noblemen should have any longer a being in this town. Besides, he has not been afraid to rail on you, my lord, who are now appointed to be his judge, calling you an ungodly villain, with many other such like abusive terms, with which he hath bespattered most of the gentry out of our town.
When this Pickthank had told his tale, the judge directed his speech to the prisoner at the bar, saying,
Thou renegade, heretic, and traitor, hast thou heard what these honest gentlemen have witnessed against thee?
May I speak a few words in my own defence?
Sirrah, sirrah, thou deservest to live no longer, but to be slain immediately upon the place. Yet, that all men may see our gentleness towards thee, let us hear what thou, vile renegade, hast to say.
I say then, in answer to what Mr. Envy hath spoken, I have never said aught but this, that what rule, or laws, or custom, or people were flat against the word of God, are opposite to Christianity. If I have said amiss of this, convince me of my error, and I am ready here before you to take back my words. As to the second, to wit, Mr. Superstition and his charge against me, I said only this, that in the worship of God there is required true faith. But there can be no true faith without a knowledge of the will of God. Therefore, whatever is thrust into the worship of God that is not agreeable to the word of God will not profit to eternal life. As to what Mr. Pickthank hath said, I say, avoiding terms, as that I am said to rail, and the like, that the prince of this town, with all the rabble and his attendants, by this gentleman named, are more fit for being in hell than in this town and country. And so the Lord have mercy upon me.
Then the judge called to the jury, who all this while stood by to hear and observe.
Gentlemen of the jury, you see this man about whom so great an uproar hath been made in this town. You have also heard what these worthy gentlemen have witnessed against him. Also you have heard his reply and confession. It lieth now in your breast to hang him or to save his life. But yet I think meet to instruct you into our law. There was an act made in the days of Pharaoh, the great servant to our prince, that, lest those of a contrary religion should multiply and go too strong for him, their males should be thrown into the river. There was also an act made in the days of Nebuchadnezzar the Great, another of his servants, that whoever would not fall down and worship his golden image should be thrown into a fiery furnace. There was also an act made in the days of Darius, that whoso for some time called upon any god but him should be cast into the lion's den. Now, the substance of these laws this rebel has broken, not only in thought, which is not to be borne, but also in word and deed, which must, therefore, needs be intolerable. You see he disputeth against our religion, and for the reason that he hath confessed he deserveth to die the death.
Then went the jury out, whose names were Mr. Blindman, Mr. No Good, Mr. Malice, Mr. Lovelust, Mr. Live Loose, Mr. Heady, Mr. Highmind, Mr. Enmity, Mr. Liar, Mr. Cruelty, Mr. Hatelight, and Mr. Implacable, who every one gave in his private voice against him among themselves, and afterwards unanimously concluded to bring him in guilty before the judge. And first among themselves Mr. Blindman, the foreman, said,
I see clearly that this man is a heretic.
Then said Mr. No Good,
Away with such a fellow from the earth.
Aye,
said Mr. Malice.
for I hate the very look of him.
Then said Mr. Lovelust,
I could never endure him.
Nor I,
said Mr. Live Loose,
for he would always be condemning my way.
Hang him,
said Mr. Heady,
A sorry scrub.
said Mr. Highmind,
My heart riseth against him.
said Mr. Enmity,
He is a rogue.
said Mr. Liar,
Hanging is too good for him.
said Mr. Cruelty,
Let us dispatch him out of the way.
said Mr. Hatelight. Then said Mr. Implacable,
Might I have all the world given to me, I could not be reconciled to him. Therefore let us forthwith bring him in guilty of death.
And so they did. Therefore he was presently condemned to be had from the place where he was to the place from whence he came, and there to be put to the most cruel death that could be invented. They therefore brought him out, to do with him according to their law. And first they scourged him, then they buffeted him, then they lanced his flesh with knives. After that they stoned him with stones, then pricked him with their swords, and last of all they burned him to ashes at the stake. Thus came Faithful to his end. Now I saw that there stood behind the multitude a chariot and a couple of horses, waiting for Faithful, who, so soon as his enemies had slain him, was taken up into it, and straightway was carried up through the clouds, with sound of trumpet, the nearest way to the celestial gate. But as for Christian, he had some delay, and was sent back to prison. So he there remained for a space. but he who overrules all things, having the power of their rage in his own hand, so wrought it about that Christian for that time escaped them, and went his way. And as he went he sang, saying,
Well, faithful, thou hast faithfully professed unto thy Lord with whom thou shalt be blessed, when faithless ones with their vain delights are crying out under their hellish plights, Sing, faithful, sing, and let thy name survive, for though they killed thee, thou art yet alive.
End of Part 1, Chapter 6. The Pilgrim's Progress, Part 1, Chapter 7. The Pilgrim's Progress, by John Bunyan, Part 1, Chapter 7. Now I saw in my dream that Christian went forth not alone, for there was one, whose name was Hopeful, being so made by looking upon Christian and Faithful in their words and behaviour in their sufferings at the fair, who joined himself unto him, and entering into a brotherly pledge, told him that he would be his companion. Thus one died to show faithfulness to the truth, and another rises out of his ashes to be a companion with Christian in his pilgrimage. This Hopeful also told Christian that there were many more of the men in the fair that would take their time and follow after. So I saw that quickly after they got out of the fair, they overtook one that was going before them, whose name was By-ends. So they said to him,
What countryman, sir?
And how far go you this way?
He told them that he came from the town of Fair Speech, and he was going to the Celestial City, but told them not his name.
From Fair Speech? Are there any that be good live there?
Yes,
said By-ends.
I hope.
Pray, sir, what may I call you?
I am a stranger to you, and you to me. If you be going this way, I shall be glad of your company. If not, I must be content.
This town of Fair Speech, I have heard of it, and as I remember, they say it's a wealthy place.
Yes, I will assure you that it is, and I have very many rich kindred there.
Pray, who are your kindred there, if a man may be so bold?
Almost the whole town, but in particular, my Lord Turnabout, my Lord Timeserver, my Lord Fair Speech, from whose ancestors that town first took its name. Also Mr. Smoothman, Mr. Facing Both Ways, Mr. Anything, and the parson of our parish, Mr. Two Tongues, was my mother's own brother by father's side. And to tell you the truth, I am become a gentleman of good quality. Yet my great-grandfather was but a waterman, looking one way and rowing another, and I got most of my estate by the same occupation.
Are you a married man?
Yes, and my wife is a very virtuous woman, the daughter of a virtuous woman. She was my Lady Faining's daughter. Therefore she came of a very honourable family, and is arrived to such a pitch of breeding that she knows how to carry it all, even to prince and peasant. 'Tis true we somewhat differ in religion from those of the stricter sort, yet but in two small points. First, we never strive against wind and tide. Secondly, we are always most zealous when religion is well dressed and goes in his silver slippers. We love much to walk with him in the street if the sun shines and the people praise him.
Then Christian stepped a little aside to his fellow Hopeful, saying,
It runs in my mind that this is one By-ends of Fair Speech, and if it be he, we have as very a knave in our company as dwelleth in all these parts.
Then said Hopeful,
Ask him. Methinks he should not be ashamed of his name.
So Christian came up with him again, and said,
Sir, you talk as if you knew something more than all the world doth, and if I take not my mark amiss, I deem I have half a guess of you. Is not your name Mr. By-ends of Fair Speech?
This is not my name, but, indeed, it is a nickname that is given me by some that cannot abide me, and I must be content to bear it as a reproach, as other good men have borne theirs before me.
But did you never give an occasion to men to call you by this name?
Never, never. The worst that ever I did to give them an occasion to give me this name was, that I had always the luck to jump in my judgment with the present way of the times, whatever it was, and my chance was to gain thereby. But if things are thus cast upon me, let me count them a blessing. But let not the malicious load me therefore with reproach.
I thought indeed that you were the man that I heard of, and to tell you what I think, I fear this name belongs to you more properly than you are willing we should think it doth.
Well, if you will thus imagine, I cannot help it. You shall find me a fair company keeper, if you still admit me your companion.
If you will go with us, you must go against wind and tide, the which I perceive is against your opinion. You must also own religion in his rags as well as when in his silver slippers, and stand by him too when bound in irons, as well as when he walketh the streets with applause.
You must not impose or lord it over my faith. Leave it to my liberty, and let me go with you.
Not a step further, unless you will do in what I declare as we do.
Then said by-ends,
I never desert my old principles, since they are harmless and profitable. If I may not go with you, I must do as I did before you overtook me, even go by myself, until some overtake me that will be glad of my company.
Now I saw in my dream that Christian and Hopeful forsook him, and kept their distance before him. But one of them, looking back, saw 3 men following Mr. By-ends, and behold, as they came up with him, he made them a very low bow, and they also gave him a compliment. The men's names were Mr. Hold-the-World, Mr. Money-Love, and Mr. Save-all, men that Mr. By-ends had been formerly acquainted with, for in their boyhood they were schoolfellows, and taught by one Mr. Gripe-man, a schoolmaster in Loughgane, which is a market-town in the county of Coveting, in the north. This schoolmaster taught them the art of getting, either by violence, cheating, flattery, lying, or by putting on a pretence of religion, and these 4 gentlemen had learned much of the art of their master, so that they could each of them have kept such a school themselves. Well, when they had, as I said, thus saluted each other, Mr. Money-Love said to Mr. By-ends,
Who are they upon the road before us?
For Christian and Hopeful were yet within view.
They are a couple of far countrymen that, after their mode, are going on pilgrimage.
Alas, why did they not stay, that we might have had their good company? For they, and we, and you, sir, I hope, are all going on pilgrimage.
We are so, indeed. But the men before us are so rigid, and love so much their own notions, and do also so lightly esteem the opinions of others, that, let a man be ever so godly, yet, if he agrees not with them in all things, they thrust him quite out of their company.
That is bad. But we read of some that are righteous overmuch, and such men's rigidness makes them judge and condemn all but themselves. But I pray, what and how many were the things wherein you differed?
Why, they, after their headstrong manner, conclude that it is their duty to rush on their journey all weathers, and I am for waiting for wind and tide. They are for taking the risk of all for God at a clap. I am for taking all advantages to secure my life and property. They are for holding their notions, though all other men be against them. But I am for religion in what and so far as the times and my safety will bear it. They are for religion when in rags and contempt. But I am for him when he walks in his golden slippers, in the sunshine, and with applause.
Ay, and hold you there still, good Mr. By-ends, for my part, I can count him but a fool, that, having the liberty to keep what he has, shall be so unwise as to lose it. Let us be wise as serpents. It is still best to make hay while the sun shines. You see how the bee lieth still all winter, and bestirs her only when she can have profit and pleasure. God sends sometimes rain, and sometimes sunshine. If they be such fools to go through the rain, yet let us be content to take fair weather along with us. For my part, I like that religion best that will stand with the safety of God's good blessings unto us. For who can imagine that is ruled by his reason, since God has bestowed upon us the good things of this life, but that he would have us keep them for his sake? Abraham and Solomon grew rich in religion, and Job says that a good man should lay up gold as dust, but he must not be such as the man before us, if they be as you have described them.
I think that we are all agreed in this matter, and therefore there needs no more words about it.
No, there needs no more words about this matter indeed, for he that believes neither Scripture nor reason, and you see we have both on our side, neither knows his own liberty nor seeks his own safety.
And so these four men, Mr. Byends, Mr. Moneylove, Mr. Save-all, and old Mr. Hold-the-world, walked on together, while Christian and Hopeful were far in advance. Then Christian and Hopeful went on till they came to a delicate plain, called Ease, where they went with much content. But that plain was but narrow, so they were quickly got over it. Now at the farther side of that plain was a little hill, called Lucre, and in that hill a silver mine, which some of them that had formerly gone that way, because of the rarity of it, had turned aside to see. But going too near the brink of the pit, the ground, being deceitful under them, broke, and they were slain. Some also had been maimed there, and could not to their dying day be their own men again. Then I saw in my dream that a little off the road, over against the silver mine, stood Demas, gentlemanlike, to call to passengers to come and see, who said to Christian and his fellow,
Ho! Turn aside hither, and I will show you a thing.
What thing so deserving as to turn us out of the way?
Here is a silver mine, and some digging in it for treasure. If you will come with a little pains, you may richly provide for yourselves.
Then said Hopeful,
Let us go see.
Not I,
said Christian.
I have heard of this place before now, and how many have there been slain, and besides, that treasure is a snare to those who seek it, for it hindereth them in their pilgrimage.
Then Christian called to Demas, saying,
Is not the place dangerous? Hath it not hindered many in their pilgrimage?
Not very dangerous, except to those that are careless.
But withal he blushed as he spake. Then said Christian to Hopeful,
Let us not stir a step, but still keep on our way.
I will warrant you, when Byends comes up, if he hath the same invitation as we, he will turn in thither to see.
No doubt thereof, for his principles lead him in that way, and 100 to 1 but he dies there.
Then Demas called out again, saying,
But will you not come over and see?
Then Christian roundly answered, saying,
Demas, thou art an enemy to the right ways of the Lord of this way, and hast been already condemned for thine own turning aside by one of his Majesty's judges. And why seekest thou to have us condemned also? Besides, if we at all turn aside, our lord the king will certainly hear thereof, and will there put us to shame, where we should stand with boldness before him.
Demas cried again that he also was one of their company, a pilgrim like themselves, and that, if they would tarry a little, he also himself would walk with them.
What is thy name? Is it not the same by the which I have called thee?
Yes, my name is Demas. I am the son of Abraham.
I know you. Gehazi was your great-grandfather, and Judas your father, and you have trod in their steps. It is but a devilish prank that thou usest. Thy father was hanged for a traitor, and thou deservest no better reward. Assure thyself that when we come to the king, we will tell him of this thy behaviour.
Thus they went their way, but by this time Byends and his companions were come again within sight, and they at the first beck went over to Demas. Now whether they fell into the pit by looking over the brink thereof, or whether they went down to dig, or whether they were smothered in the bottom by the damps that commonly arise, of these things I am not certain, but this I observed, that they were never seen again in the way. Then sang Christian,
By-ends and silver Demas both agree. One calls the other runs, that he may be a sharer of this lucre, so these two take up in this world, and no further go.
Now I saw that just on the other side of the plain the pilgrims came to a place where stood an old monument hard by the highway side, at the sight of which they were both concerned, because of the strangeness of the form thereof. For it seemed to them as if it had been a woman changed into the shape of a pillar. Here therefore they stood looking and looking upon it, but could not for a time tell what they should make thereof. At last Hopeful espied written above, upon the head thereof, a writing in an unusual hand. But he, being no scholar, called to Christian, for he was learned, to see if he could pick out the meaning. So he came, and after a little laying of letters together, he found the same to be this, Remember Lot's wife. So he read to his fellow, after which they both concluded that that was the pillar of salt to which Lot's wife was turned, for her looking back with a covetous heart when she was going from Sodom. Which sudden and amazing sight gave them occasion for speaking thus.
Ah, my brother, this is a seasonable sight. It came just in time to us after the invitation which Demas gave us to come over to view the hill lucre, and had we gone over as he desired us, and as thou wast inclining to do, my brother, we had, for aught I know, been made ourselves like this woman, a spectacle for those who shall come after to behold.
I am sorry that I was so foolish, and am made to wonder that I am not now as Lot's wife. For wherein was the difference betwixt her sin and mine? She only looked back, and I had a desire to go see. Let God's goodness be praised, and let me be ashamed that ever such a thing should be in mine heart.
Let us take notice of what we see here, for our help for time to come. This woman escaped one judgment, for she fell not by the destruction of Sodom, yet she was destroyed by another, as we see. She is turned into a pillar of salt.
What a mercy is it that neither thou, but especially I, am not made myself this example! This gives reason to us to thank God, to fear before him, and always to remember Lot's wife.
I saw then that they went on their way to a pleasant river, which David the king called the river of God, but John the river of the water of life. Now their way lay just upon the bank of this river. Here, therefore, Christian and his companion walked with great delight. They drank also the water of the river, which was pleasant and enlivening to their weary spirits. Besides, on the banks of this river on either side were green trees that bore all manner of fruit, and the leaves of the trees were good for medicine. With the fruit of these trees they were also much delighted, and the leaves they ate to prevent illness, especially such diseases that come to those that heat their blood by travels. On either side of the river was also a meadow, curiously beautified with lilies, and it was green all the year long. In this meadow they lay down and slept, for here they might lie down safely. When they awoke, they gathered again of the fruit of the trees, and drank again of the water of the river, and they lay down again to sleep. This they did several days and nights. Then they sang,
Behold ye how these crystal streams do glide, to comfort pilgrims by the highway side. The meadows green, besides their fragrant smell, yield dainties for them, and he who can tell.
What pleasant fruit, yea, leaves, these trees do yield! We'll soon sell all, that he may buy this field.
So when they were disposed to go on, for they were not as yet at their journey's end, they ate and drank and departed. Now I beheld in my dream that they had not journeyed far, but the river and the way for a time parted, at which they were not a little sorry. Yet they durst not go out of the way. Now the way from the river was rough, and their feet tender by reason of their travels. So the souls of the pilgrims were much discouraged because of the way. Wherefore, still as they went on, they wished for a better way. Now a little before them there was, on the left hand of the road, a meadow, and a stile to go over into it, and that meadow was called Bypath Meadow. Then said Christian to his fellow,
If this meadow lieth along by our wayside, let's go over it.
Then he went to the stile to see, and behold, a path lay along by the way on the other side of the fence.
It is according to my wish,
said Christian.
Here is the easiest going. Come, good Hopeful, and let us go over.
But how if this path should lead us out of the way?
That is not likely,
said the other.
Look, doth it not go along by the wayside?
So Hopeful, being persuaded by his fellow, went after him over the stile. When they were gone over, and were got into the path, they found it very easy to their feet, and withal they, looking before them, espied a man walking as they did, and his name was Vain Confidence. So they called after him, and asked him whither that way led. He said,
To the Celestial Gate.
Look,
said Christian.
Did I not tell you so? By this you may see we are right.
So they followed, and he went before them. But, behold, the night came on, and it grew very dark, so that they that were behind lost sight of him that went before. He, therefore, that went before, Vain Confidence by name, not seeing the way before him, fell into a deep pit, which was on purpose there made by the prince of those grounds to catch careless fools, withal, and was dashed in pieces with his fall. Now Christian and his fellow heard him fall, so they called to know the matter, but there was none to answer, only they heard a groaning. Then said Hopeful,
Where are we now?
Then was his fellow silent, as mistrusting that he had led him out of the way. And now it began to rain, and thunder, and lighten in a most dreadful manner, and the water rose again. Then Hopeful groaned in himself, saying,
Oh, that I had kept on my way!
Who could have thought that this path should have led us out of the way?
I was afraid on't at the very first, and therefore gave you that gentle caution. I would have spoken plainer, but that you are older than I.
Good brother, be not offended. I am very sorry I have brought thee out of the way, and that I have put thee into such great danger. Pray, my brother, forgive me. I did not do it of any evil intent.
Be comforted, my brother, for I forgive thee, and believe, too, that this shall be for our good.
I am glad I have with me a merciful brother, but we must not stand still. Let us try to go back again.
But, good brother, let me go before.
No, if you please, let me go first, that if there be any danger I may be first therein, because by my means we are both gone out of the way.
No, you shall not go first, for your mind being troubled may lead you out of the way again.
Then, for their encouragement, they heard the voice of one saying, Let thine heart be towards the highway, even the way that thou wentest. Turn again. But by this time the waters were greatly risen, by reason of which the way of going back was very dangerous. Then I thought that it is easier going out of the way when we are in, than going in when we are out. Yet they undertook to go back, but it was so dark, and the flood so high, that, in their going back, they had like to have been drowned 9 or 10 times. Neither could they, with all the skill they had, get again to the stile that night. Wherefore, at last lighting under a little shelter, they sat down there until daybreak, but being weary, they fell asleep. Now there was, not far from the place where they lay, a castle, called Doubting Castle, the owner whereof was Giant Despair, and it was in his grounds they now were sleeping. Wherefore he, getting up in the morning early, and walking up and down in his fields, caught Christian and Hopeful asleep in his grounds. Then, with a grim and surly voice, he bid them awake, and asked them whence they were, and what they did in his grounds. They told him they were pilgrims, and that they had lost their way. Then said the giant,
You have this night trespassed on me, by trampling in and lying on my grounds, and therefore you must go along with me.
So they were forced to go, because he was stronger than they. They had also but little to say, for they knew themselves in fault. The giant therefore drove them before him, and put them into his castle, into a very dark dungeon, nasty and smelling vilely to the spirits of those two men. Here, then, they lay from Wednesday morning till Saturday night, without one bit of bread or drop of drink, or light, or any to ask how they did. They were, therefore, here in evil case, and were far from friends and people whom they knew. Now, in this place Christian had double sorrow, because it was through his thoughtless haste that they were brought into this distress. Now Giant Despair had a wife, and her name was Diffidence. So when he was gone to bed, he told his wife what he had done, to wit, that he had taken a couple of prisoners and cast them into his dungeon for trespassing on his grounds. Then he asked her also what he had best to do further to them. So she asked them what they were, whence they came, and whither they were bound, and he told her. Then she advised him that when he arose in the morning he should beat them without any mercy. So when he arose he getteth him a grievous crab-tree cudgel, and goes down into the dungeon to them, and there first fell to abusing them as if they were dogs, although they never gave him a word of distaste. Then he falls upon them and beats them fearfully, in such sort that they were not able to help themselves, or to turn them upon the floor. This done, he withdraws, and leaves them there to sorrow over their misery, and to mourn under their distress. So all that day they spent their time in nothing but sighs and bitter grief. The next night she, talking with her husband about them further, and understanding that they were yet alive, did advise him to tell them to make away with themselves. So when morning was come, he goes to them in a surly manner as before, and perceiving them to be very sore with the stripes that he had given them the day before, he told them that since they were never like to come out of that place, their only way would be forthwith to make an end of themselves, either with knife, halter, or poison.
For why,
said he,
should you choose life, seeing it is attended with so much bitterness?
But they desired him to let them go. With that he looked ugly upon them, and rushing to them, had doubtless made an end of them himself, but that he fell into one of his fits, for he sometimes in sunshiny weather fell into fits, and lost for a time the use of his hands, wherefore he withdrew and left them as before to consider what to do. Then did the prisoners consult between themselves whether it was best to take his advice or no, and thus they began to discourse.
"Brother,"
said Christian,
"what shall we do? The life we now live is miserable. For my part, I know not whether it is best to live thus or to die out of hand. My soul chooseth strangling rather than life, and the grave is more easy for me than this dungeon. Shall we be ruled by the giant?"
Indeed, our present condition is dreadful, and death would be far more welcome to me than thus for ever to abide. But yet, let us think. The lord of the country to which we are going hath said, Thou shalt do no murder. No, not to another man's person. Much more, then, are we forbidden to take his advice to kill ourselves. Besides, he that kills another can but commit murder upon his body, but for one to kill himself is to kill body and soul at once. And moreover, my brother, thou talkest of ease in the grave, but hast thou forgotten the hell, whither for certain the murderers go? For no murderer hath eternal life. And let us consider again, that all the law is not in the hand of Giant Despair. Others, so far as I can understand, have been taken by him as well as we, and yet have escaped out of his hand. Who knows but that God, who made the world, may cause that Giant Despair may die? Or that, at some time or other, he may forget to lock us in? Or that he may, in a short time, have another of his fits before us, and he may lose the use of his limbs? And, if ever that should come to pass again, for my part, I am resolved to pluck up the heart of a man, and try to my utmost to get from under his hand. I was a fool that I did not try to do it before. But however, my brother, let us be patient, and endure a while. The time may come that may give us a happy release, but let us not be our own murderers.
With these words Hopeful at present did calm the mind of his brother. So they continued together in the dark that day, in their sad and doleful condition. Well, towards evening the giant goes down into the dungeon again to see if his prisoners had taken his counsel. But when he came there he found them alive, and truly alive was all. For now, what for want of bread and water, and by reason of the wounds they received when he beat them, they could do little but breathe. But, I say, he found them alive. At which he fell into a grievous rage, and told them that, seeing they had disobeyed his counsel, it should be worse with them than if they had never been born. At this they trembled greatly, and I think that Christian fell into a swoon. But coming a little to himself again, they renewed their discourse about the giant's advice, and whether yet they had best to take it or no. Now Christian again seemed for doing it, but Hopeful made his second reply as followeth.
My brother,
said he,
rememberest thou not how valiant thou hast been heretofore? Apollyon could not crush thee, nor could all that thou didst hear, or see, or feel in the valley of the shadow of death. What hardship, terror, and amazement hast thou already gone through, and art thou now nothing but fear? Thou seest that I am in the dungeon with thee, a far weaker man by nature than thou art. Also, this giant has wounded me as well as thee, and hath also cut off the bread and water from my mouth. And with thee I mourn without the light. But let us have a little more patience. Remember how thou showedst thyself the man at Vanity Fair, and wast neither afraid of the chain, nor cage, nor yet of bloody death. Wherefore, let us, at least, to avoid the shame that it becomes not a Christian to be found in, bear up with patience as well as we can.
Now, night being come again, and the giant and his wife being in bed, she asked him concerning the prisoners, and if they had taken his advice, to which he replied,
They are sturdy rogues. They choose rather to bear all hardship than to make away with themselves.
Then said she,
Take them under the castle yard tomorrow, and show them the bones and skulls of those that thou hast already killed, and make them believe, ere a week comes to an end, thou wilt tear them also in pieces, as thou hast done their fellows before them.
So when the morning was come, the giant goes to them again, and takes them into the castle yard, and shows them as his wife had bidden them.
These,
said he,
were pilgrims, as you are, once, and they trespass in my grounds, as you have done. And when I thought fit, I tore 'em in pieces, and so within 10 days I will do you. Go, get down to your den again.
And with that he beat them all the way thither. They lay therefore all day on Saturday in a lamentable case as before. Now when night was come, and when Mrs. Diffidence and her husband the giant were got to bed, they began to renew their talking of their prisoners, and withal the old giant wondered that he could neither by his blows nor counsel bring them to an end. And with that his wife replied,
I fear,
said she,
that they live in hope that some will come to relieve them, or that they have picklocks about them, by the means of which they hope to escape.
And sayest thou so, my dear?
said the giant.
I will therefore search them in the morning.
Well, on Saturday, about midnight, they began to pray, and continued in prayer till almost break of day. Now, a little before it was day, good Christian, as one half amazed, brake out into this earnest speech.
What a fool,
quoth he,
am I to lie in a foul-smelling dungeon when I may as well walk at liberty? I have a key in my bosom called Promise that will, I am sure, open any lock in Doubting Castle.
Then said Hopeful,
That is good news, good brother. Pluck it out of thy bosom, and try.
Then Christian pulled it out of his bosom, and began to try at the dungeon door, whose bolt, as he turned the key, gave back, and the door flew open with ease, and Christian and Hopeful both came out. Then he went to the outward door that leads into the castle yard, and with his key opened that door also. After he went to the iron gate, for that must be opened too, but that lock went exceedingly hard, yet the key did open it. Then they thrust open the gate to make their escape with speed. But that gate, as it opened, made such a creaking that it waked Giant Despair, who, hastily rising to pursue his prisoners, felt his limbs to fail, for his fits took him again, so that he could by no means go after them. Then they went on, and came to the king's highway again, and so were safe, because they were out of Giant Despair's rule. Now, when they were gone over the stile, they began to contrive with themselves what they should do at that stile to prevent those that should come after from falling into the hands of Giant Despair. So they agreed to build there a pillar, and to engrave upon the side thereof this sentence: Over this stile is the way to Doubting Castle, which is kept by Giant Despair, who despiseth the king of the celestial country, and seeks to destroy his holy pilgrims. Many, therefore, that followed after, read what was written, and escaped the danger. This done, they sang as follows.
Out of the way we went, and then we found what 'twas to tread upon forbidden ground, and let them that come after have a care, lest heedlessness make them as we to fare.
Lest they for trespassing his prisoners are, whose castle's Doubting, and whose name's Despair.
End of Part 1, Chapter 7. The Pilgrim's Progress, Part 1, Chapter 8. The Pilgrim's Progress, by John Bunyan, Part 1, Chapter 8. They went then till they came to the Delectable Mountains, which mountains belong to the lord of that hill of which we have spoken before. So they went up to the mountains to behold the gardens and orchards, the vineyards and fountains of water, where they also drank and washed themselves, and did freely eat of the vineyards. Now there were on the tops of these mountains shepherds feeding their flocks, and they stood by the highway side. The pilgrims therefore went to them, and leaning upon their staves, as is common with weary pilgrims when they stand to talk with any by the way, they asked,
Whose delightful mountains are these, and whose be the sheep that feed upon them?
These mountains are Emmanuel's land, and they are within sight of his city. And the sheep also are his, and he laid down his life for them.
Is this the way to the celestial city?
You are just in your way.
How far is it thither?
Too far for any but those who shall get thither indeed.
Is the way safe or dangerous?
Safe for those for whom it is to be safe, but sinners shall fall therein.
Is there in this place any relief for pilgrims that are weary and faint in the way?
The Lord of these mountains hath given us a charge not to be forgetful to care for strangers. Therefore the good of the place is before you.
I saw also in my dream that when the shepherds perceived that they were wayfaring men, they also put questions to them, to which they made answer, as in other places, as,
Whence came you?
And,
How got you into the way?
And,
By what means have you so persevered therein? For but few of them that begin to come hither do show their faces on these mountains.
But when the shepherds heard their answers, being pleased therewith, they looked very lovingly upon them, and said,
Welcome to the Delectable Mountains.
The shepherds, I say, whose names are Knowledge, Experience, Watchful, and Sincere, took them by the hand, and took them to their tents, and made them partake of what was ready at present. They said, moreover,
We would that you should stay here a while, to be acquainted with us, and yet more to cheer yourselves with the good of these delectable mountains.
They then told them that they were content to stay, so they went to rest that night, because it was very late. Then I saw in my dream that in the morning the shepherds called up Christian and Hopeful to walk with them upon the mountains. So they went forth with them and walked a while, having a pleasant prospect on every side. Then said the shepherds one to another,
Shall we show these pilgrims some wonders?
So, when they had concluded to do it, they had them first to the top of the hill called Error, which was very steep on the farthest side, and bid them look down to the bottom. So Christian and Hopeful looked down, and saw at the bottom several men dashed all to pieces by a fall they had had from the top. Then said Christian,
What meaneth this?
Then the shepherds answered,
Have you not heard of them that were made to err, by hearkening to Hymenaeus and Philetus, as concerning the faith of the rising from the dead?
They answered,
Yes.
Then said the shepherds,
Those, you see, lie dashed to pieces at the bottom of this mountain are they, and they have continued to this day unburied, as you see, for an example to others to take heed how they clamber too high, or how they come too near the brink of this mountain.
Then I saw that they had them to the top of another mountain, and the name of that is Caution, and bid them look afar off, and when they did, they perceived, as they thought, several men walking up and down among the tombs that were there. And they perceived that the men were blind, because they stumbled sometimes upon the tombs, and because they could not get out from among them. Then said Christian,
What means this?
The shepherds then answered,
Did you not see a little below these mountains a stile that led into a meadow on the left-hand side of this way?
They answered,
Yes.
Then said the shepherds,
From that stile there goes a path that leads directly to Doubting Castle, which is kept by Giant Despair. And these men,
pointing to them among the tombs,
came once on pilgrimage, as you do now, even until they came to that same stile. And because the right way was rough in that place, they chose to go out of it into that meadow, and there were taken by Giant Despair, and cast into Doubting Castle, where, after they had been kept a while in the dungeon, he at last did put out their eyes, and led them among those tombs, where he has left them to wander to this very day, that the saying of the wise man might be fulfilled, He that wandereth out of the way of knowledge shall remain in the congregation of the dead.
Then Christian and Hopeful looked upon one another with tears gushing out, but yet said nothing to the shepherds. Then I saw in my dream that the shepherds had them to another place in the bottom, where was a door on the side of a hill, and they opened the door, and bid them look in. They looked in, therefore, and saw that within it was very dark and smoky. They also thought that they heard there a rumbling noise, as of fire, and a cry of some tormented. And then they smelt the scent of brimstone. Then said Christian,
What means this?
The shepherds told them,
This is a byway to hell, a way that hypocrites go in at, namely, such as sell their birthright with Esau, such as sell their master with Judas, such as blaspheme the gospel with Alexander, and that lie and deceive with Ananias and Sapphira his wife.
Then said Hopeful to the shepherds,
I perceive that these had on them even every one a show of pilgrimage, as we have now, had they not?
Yes, and held it a long time too.
How far might they go on in pilgrimage in their day, since they, notwithstanding, were thus miserably cast away?
Some farther, and some not so far as these mountains.
Then said the pilgrims one to another,
We have need to cry to the strong for strength.
Aye, and you will have need to use it when you have it too.
By this time the pilgrims had a desire to go forward, and the shepherds a desire they should. So they walked together towards the end of the mountains. Then said the shepherds one to another,
Let us here show to the pilgrims the gate of the celestial city, if they have skill to look through our perspective glass.
The pilgrims then lovingly accepted the motion. So they had them to the top of a high hill called Clear, and gave them their glass to look. Then they tried to look, but the remembrance of that last thing that the shepherds had showed them made their hands shake, by means of which hindrance they could not look steadily through the glass. Yet they thought they saw something like the gate, and also some of the glory of the place. Thus they went away, and sang this song.
Thus by the shepherds secrets are revealed, which from all other men are kept concealed.
Come to the shepherds then, if you would see things deep, things hid, and that mysterious be.
When they were about to depart, one of the shepherds gave them a note of the way. Another of them bid them beware of the flatterer. The third bid them take heed that they slept not upon the enchanted ground, and the fourth bid them Godspeed. So I awoke from my dream. End of Part 1, Chapter 8. The Pilgrim's Progress, Part 1, Chapter 9. The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, Part 1, Chapter 9. And I slept and dreamed again, and saw the same two pilgrims going down the mountains along the highway towards the city. Now a little below these mountains, on the left hand, lieth the country of Conceit, from which country there comes into the way in which the pilgrims walked a little crooked lane. Here, therefore, they met with a very brisk lad that came out of that country, and his name was Ignorance. So Christian asked him from what parts he came, and whither he was going.
Sir, I was born in the country that lieth off there a little on the left hand, and I am going to the celestial city.
But how do you think to get in at the gate? For you may find some difficulty there.
As other people do.
But what have you to show at the gate, that may cause that the gate should be opened to you?
I know my Lord's will, and have been a good liver. I pay every man his own. I pray, fast, pay money to the church, and give to the poor, and have left my country for whither I am going.
But thou camest not in at the wicket gate that is at the head of this way. Thou camest in hither through that same crooked lane, and therefore I fear, however thou mayest think of thyself, when the reckoning day shall come, thou wilt have laid to thy charge that thou art a thief and a robber, instead of getting admittance into the city.
Gentlemen, ye be utter strangers to me. I know you not be content to follow the custom of your country, and I will follow the custom of mine. I hope all will be well, and as for the gate that you talk of, all the world knows that that is a great way off of our country. I cannot think that any man in all our parts doth so much as know the way to it, nor need they matter whether they do or no, since we have, as you see, a fine, pleasant green lane that comes down from our country the next way into the way.
When Christian saw that the man was wise in his own opinion, he said to Hopeful, whisperingly,
There is more hope of a fool than of him.
And said, moreover,
When he that is a fool walketh by the way, his wisdom faileth him, and he saith to every one that he is a fool. What, shall we talk further with him, or outgo him at present, and so leave him to think of what he hath heard already, and then stop again for him afterwards, and see if by degrees we can do any good for him?
Then said Hopeful,
Let Ignorance a little while now muse on what is said, and let him not refuse good counsel to embrace, lest he remain still ignorant of what's the chiefest gain. God saith, Those that no understanding have, although he made them he will not save.
He further added,
It is not good, I think, to say all to him at once. Let us pass him by, if you will, and talk to him by and by, even as he is able to bear it.
So they both went on, and ignorance he came after. Now when they had passed him a little way, they entered into a very dark lane, where they met a man whom 7 devils had bound with 7 strong cords, and were carrying of him back to the door that they saw on the side of the hill. Now good Christian began to tremble, and so did Hopeful his companion. Yet, as the devils led away the man, Christian looked to see if he knew him, and he thought it might be one Turnaway, that dwelt in the town of Apostasy. But he did not perfectly see his face, for he did hang his head like a thief that is found. But being gone past, Hopeful looked after him, and espied on his back a paper with this inscription: One who was wicked while claiming to be good, and turned away from God. Then said Christian to his fellow,
Now I call to remembrance that which was told of a thing that happened to a good man hereabout. The name of that man was Little Faith, but a good man, and dwelt in the town of Sincere. The thing was this: at the entering in at this passage there comes down from Broadway Gate a lane called Dead Man's Lane, so called because of the murders that are commonly done there. And this Little Faith, going on pilgrimage as we do now, chanced to sit down there and slept. Now there happened at that time to come down that lane from Broadway Gate 3 sturdy rogues, and their names were Faint Heart, Mistrust, and Guilt, 3 brothers, and they, espying Little Faith where he was, came galloping up with speed. Now the good man was just awaked from his sleep, and was getting up to go on his journey. So they came up all to him, and with threatening language bid him stand. At this Little Faith looked as white as a sheet, and had neither power to fight nor fly. Then said Faint Heart, Deliver thy purse. But he making no haste to do it, for he was loath to lose his money, Mistrust ran up to him, and thrusting his hand into his pocket, pulled out thence a bag of silver. Then he cried out, Thieves! Thieves! With that, Guilt, with a great club that was in his hand, struck Little Faith on the head, and with that blow felled him flat to the ground, where he lay bleeding as one that would bleed to death. All this while the thieves stood by. But at last, they hearing that some were upon the road, and fearing lest it should be one great Grace, that dwells in the city of good confidence, they betook themselves to their heels, and left this good man to shift for himself. Now after a while Little Faith came to himself, and getting up, made shift to scramble on his way. This was the story.
But did they take from him all that he ever had?
No, the place where his jewels were they never ransacked, so those he kept still. But, as I was told, the good man was much afflicted for his loss, for the thieves got most of his spending money. That which they got not, as I said, were jewels. Also he had a little odd money left, but scarce enough to bring him to his journey's end. Nay, if I was not misinformed, he was forced to beg as he went to keep himself alive, for his jewels he might not sell. But beg and do what he could, he went, as we say, often with a hungry stomach the most part of the rest of the way.
But is it not a wonder they got not from him his certificate, by which he was to receive admission at the Celestial Gate?
It is a wonder, but they got not that, though they missed it, not through any cunning of his, for he, being dismayed by their coming upon him, had neither power nor skill to hide anything, so it was more by good providence than by his endeavour that they missed that good thing.
But it must needs be a comfort to him that they got not his jewels from him.
It might have been great comfort to him had he used it as he should, but they that told me the story said that he made but little use of it all the rest of the way, and that because of the alarm that he had in their taking away his money, indeed he forgot it a great part of the rest of his journey, and besides, when at any time it came into his mind, and he began to be comforted therewith, then would fresh thoughts of his loss come again upon him, and those thoughts would swallow up all.
Alas, poor man, this could not but be a great grief unto him.
Grief, ay, a grief indeed. Would it not have been so to any of us had we been used as he, to be robbed and wounded too, and that in a strange place as he was? It is a wonder he did not die with grief, poor heart. I was told that he scattered almost all the rest of the way with nothing but doleful and bitter complaints, telling also to all that overtook him, or that he overtook in the way as he went, where he was robbed and how, who they were that did it and what he had lost, how he was wounded, and that he hardly escaped with his life.
But it is a wonder that his necessities did not put him upon selling or pawning some of his jewels, that he might have wherewith to relieve himself in his journey.
Thou talkest like one whose head is thick to this very day. For what should he pawn them, or to whom should he sell them? In all that country where he was robbed, his jewels were not accounted of, nor did he want that relief which could from thence be administered to him. Besides, had his jewels been missing at the gate of the celestial city, he had, and that he knew well enough, been shut out from an inheritance there, and that would have been worse to him than the coming and villainy of 10,000 thieves.
But, Christian, these three fellows, I am persuaded in my heart, are but a company of cowards. Would they have run else, think you, as they did at the noise of one that was coming on the road? Why did not little Faith pluck up a greater heart? He might, methinks, have stood one brush with them, and have yielded when there had been no remedy.
That they are cowards many have said, but few have found it so in the time of trial. As for a great heart, little Faith had none. And I perceive by thee, my brother, hadst thou been the man concerned, thou art but for a brush, and then to yield. And verily, since this is the height of thy courage, now that they are a distance from us, should they appear to thee as they did to him, they might put thee to second thoughts. But consider again, they are but journeyman thieves, they serve under the king of the bottomless pit, who, if need be, will come into their aid himself, and his voice is as the roaring of a lion. I myself have been engaged as this little Faith was, and I found it a terrible thing. These three villains set upon me, and I, beginning like a Christian to resist, they gave but a call, and in came their master. I would, as the saying is, have given my life for a penny, but that as God would have it I was clothed with the armour of proof. Ay, and yet though I was so protected, I found it hard work to quit myself like a man. No man can tell what in the combat attends us, but he that hath been in the battle himself.
Well, but they ran, you see, when they did but suppose that one great grace was in the way.
True, they have often fled, both they and their master, when great grace hath but appeared, and no marvel, for he is the king's champion. But I trow you will put some difference between little Faith and the king's champion. All the king's subjects are not his champions, nor can they when tried do such feats of war as he. Is it meet to think that a little child should handle Goliath as David did? Or that there should be the strength of an ox in a wren? Some are strong, some are weak, some have great faith, some have little. This man was one of the weak, and therefore he went to the wall.
I would it had been great grace for their sakes.
If it had been he might have had his hands full. For I must tell you that though great grace is excellent good at his weapons, and has and can, so long as he keeps them at sword's point, do well enough with them, yet if they get within them, even faint heart, mistrust, or the other, it shall go hard, but they will throw up his heels. And when a man is down, you know, what can he do? Whoso looks well upon great grace's face will see those scars and cuts there that shall easily give proof of what I say. Yea, once I heard that he should say, and that when he was in the combat, we despaired even of life. How did these sturdy rogues and their fellows make David groan, mourn, and roar? Yea, Heman and Hezekiah too, though champions in their days, were forced to bestir when by these attacked, and yet notwithstanding they had their coats soundly brushed by them. Peter, upon a time, would go try what he could do, but though some do say of him that he is the prince of apostles, they handled him so that they made him at the last afraid of a sorry girl. Besides, their king is at their whistle, he is never out of hearing, and if at any time they be put to the worst, he, if possible, comes in to help them. And of him it is said, the sword of him that layeth at him cannot hold, the spear, the dart, nor the habergeon. He esteemeth iron as straw, and brass as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee, sling stones are turned with him into stubble. Darts are counted as stubble, he laugheth at the shaking of a spear. What can a man do in this case? It is true, if a man could at every turn have Job's horse, and had skill and courage to ride him, he might do notable things. For his neck is clothed with thunder, he will not be afraid as the grasshopper. The glory of his nostrils is terrible, he poureth in the valley, and rejoiceth in his strength. He goeth on to meet the armed men. He mocketh at fear, and is not affrighted, neither turneth he his back from the sword. The quiver rattleth against him, the glittering spear and the shield. He swalloweth the ground with fierceness and rage, neither believeth he that it is the sound of the trumpet. He saith among the trumpets, Ha ha! And he smelleth the battle afar off, the thunder of the captains and the shouting. But for such footmen as thee and I are, let us never desire to meet with an enemy, nor vaunt as if we could do better when we hear of others that have been foiled, nor be tickled at the thoughts of our manhood, for such commonly come by the worst when tried. Witness Peter, of whom I made mention before, he would swagger, he would, as his vain mind prompted him to say, do better and stand more for his master than all men. But who so foiled and run down by those villains as he?
Then the Christian sang,
Poor little Faith has been among the thieves, was robbed. Remember this, whoso believes and gets more faith shall then a victor be over 10,000, else scarce over 3.
So they went on, and ignorance followed. They went then till they came to a place where they saw a way put itself into their way, and seemed withal to lie as straight as the way which they should go. And here they knew not which of the two to take, for both seemed straight before them. Therefore here they stood still to consider. And as they were thinking about the way, behold, a man, black of flesh, but covered with a very light robe, came to them, and asked them why they stood there. They answered they were going to the celestial city, but knew not which of these ways to take.
"Follow me,"
said the man.
"It is thither that I am going."
So they followed him to the way that but now came into the road, which by degrees turned and turned them so from the city that they desired to go to, that in a little time their faces were turned away from it. Yet they followed him. But by and by, before they were aware, he led them both within the folds of a net, in which they were both so entangled that they knew not what to do. And with that the white robe fell off the black man's back. Then they saw where they were. Wherefore there they lay crying some time, for they could not get themselves out. Then said Christian to his fellow,
"Now do I see myself in an error. Did not the shepherds bid us beware of flatterers? As is the saying of the wise man, so we have found it this day. A man that flattereth his neighbour spreadeth a net at his feet."
They also gave us a note of directions about the way, for our more sure finding thereof. But therein we have also forgotten to read, and have not kept ourselves from the paths of the destroyer.
Thus they lay bewailing themselves in the net. At last they espied a shining one coming towards them, with a whip of small cord in his hand. When he was come to the place where they were, he asked them whence they came, and what they did there. They told him that they were poor pilgrims going to Zion, but were led out of their way by a black man clothed in white.
"Who bid us?"
said they.
"Follow him, for he was going thither too."
Then said he with the whip,
"It is a flatterer, a false prophet that hath changed himself into an angel of light."
So he rent the net, and let the men out. Then said he to them,
"Follow me, that I may set you in your way again."
So he led them back to the way which they had left to follow the flatterer. Then he asked them, saying,
"Where did you lie last night?"
They said,
"With the shepherds upon the Delectable Mountains."
He asked them then if they had not of those shepherds a note of direction for the way. They answered,
Yes.
"But you did not,"
said he.
"when you were at a stand, pluck out and read your note."
They answered,
No.
He asked them,
"Why?"
They said they forgot. He asked them, moreover, if the shepherds did not bid them beware of the flatterer. They answered,
"Yes, but we did not imagine,"
said they,
that this fine-spoken man had been he.
Then I saw in my dream that he commanded them to lie down, which, when they did, he whipped them sore, to teach them the good way wherein they should walk. And as he whipped them, he said,
"As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Be zealous, therefore, and repent."
This done, he bid them go on their way, and take good heed to the other directions of the shepherds. So they thanked him for all his kindness, and went softly along the right way, singing,
"Come hither, you that walk along the way. See how the pilgrims fare that go astray. They catched are in an entangling net, 'cause they good counsel lightly did forget."
'Tis true they rescued were, but yet you see, they're scourged to boot. Let this your caution be.
Now after a while they perceived afar off one coming softly and alone, all along the highway to meet them. Then said Christian to his fellow,
"Yonder is a man with his back towards Zion, and he is coming to meet us."
I see him. Let us take heed to ourselves, lest he should prove a flatterer also.
So he drew nearer and nearer, and at last came up to them. His name was Atheist, and he asked them whither they were going.
"We are going to Mount Zion."
Then Atheist fell into a very great laughter.
"What is the meaning of your laughter?"
I laugh to see what ignorant persons you are, to take upon yourselves so tedious a journey, and yet are like to have nothing but your trouble for your pains.
Why, man, do you think we shall not be received?
Received? There is no such place as you dream of in all this world.
But there is in the world to come.
When I was at home in mine own country, I heard, as you now affirm, and from that hearing went out to sea, and have been seeking this city these 20 years, but find no more of it than I did the first day I set out.
We have both heard and believed that there is such a place to be found.
Had not I, when at home, believed, I had not come thus far to seek, but finding none, and yet I should had there been such a place to be found, for I have gone to seek it farther than you. I am going back again, and will seek to refresh myself with the things that I then cast away for hopes of that which I now see is not.
Then said Christian to Hopeful his fellow,
Is it true what this man hath said?
Take heed, he is one of the flatterers. Remember what it hath cost us once already for hearkening to such kind of fellows. What? No Mount Zion? Did we not see from the delectable mountains the gate of the city? Also, are we not now to walk by faith? Let us go on, lest the man with the whip overtake us again. I say, my brother, cease to hear him, and let us believe to the saving of the soul.
My brother, I did not put the question to thee for that I doubted the truth of our belief myself, but to prove thee, and to fetch from thee a fruit of the honesty of thy heart. As for this man, I know that he is blinded. Let thee and me go on, knowing that we have belief of the truth, and no lie is of the truth.
Now do I rejoice in hope of the glory of God.
So they turned away from the man, and he, laughing at them, went his way. I then saw in my dream that they went till they came into a certain country, whose air naturally tended to make one drowsy if he came a stranger into it. And here Hopeful began to be very dull and heavy of sleep. Wherefore he said unto Christian,
I do now begin to grow so drowsy that I can scarcely hold up mine eyes. Let us lie down here and take one nap.
By no means,
said the other,
lest sleeping we never awake more.
Why, my brother? Sleep is sweet to the labouring man. We may be refreshed if we take a nap.
Do you not remember that one of the shepherds bid us beware of the enchanted ground? He meant by that we should beware of sleeping. Wherefore let us not sleep as others, but let us watch and be sober.
I acknowledge myself in fault, and had I been here alone, I had, by sleeping, run the danger of death. I see it is true that the wise man saith, 2 are better than 1. Hitherto hath thy company been my help, and thou shalt have a good reward for thy labour.
Now then,
said Christian,
to prevent drowsiness in this place, let us talk about something profitable.
With all my heart.
Where shall we begin?
Where God began with us. But do you begin, if you please.
I will sing you first this song. When saints do sleepy grow, let them come hither, and hear how these 2 pilgrims talk together. Yea, let them learn of them in any wise, thus to keep ope their drowsy slumbering eyes. Saints' fellowship, if it be managed well, keeps them awake, and that in spite of hell.
Then Christian began, and said,
I will ask you a question. How came you to think at first of doing as you do now?
Do you mean, how came I at first to look after the good of my soul?
Yes, that is my meaning.
I continued a great while in the delight of those things which were seen and sold at our fair, things which I believe now would have, had I continued in them still, drowned me in ruin and destruction.
What things were they?
All the treasures and riches of the world. Also I delighted much in rioting, revelling, drinking, swearing, lying, uncleanness, Sabbath-breaking, and what not, that tended to destroy the soul. But I found at last, by hearing and considering of things that are holy, which indeed I heard of you, as also of beloved Faithful, that was put to death for his faith, and good living in Vanity Fair, that the end of these things is death, and that for these things' sake the wrath of God cometh upon those who disobey him.
And did you presently fall under the power of this feeling?
No, I was not willing presently to know the evil of sin, nor the destruction that follows upon the doing of it. but tried, when my mind at first began to be shaken with the word, to shut mine eyes against the light thereof.
But what was the cause of your waiting so long?
Well, the causes were, firstly, I was ignorant that this was the work of God upon me. Secondly, sin was yet very sweet to my flesh, and I was loath to leave it. Thirdly, I could not tell how to part with mine old companions, their presence and actions were so desirable unto me. Fourthly, the hours in which these feelings were upon me were such troublesome and such heart-affrighting hours, that I could not bear, no, not so much as the remembrance of them upon mine heart.
Then, as it seems, sometimes you got rid of your trouble.
Yes, verily, but it would come into my mind again, and then I should be as bad, nay, worse than I was before.
Why? What was it that brought your sins to mind again?
Well, many things. As, if I did but meet a good man in the streets, or if I have heard any read in the Bible, or if mine head did begin to ache, or if I were told that some of my neighbours were sick, or if I heard the bell toll for some that were dead, or if I thought of dying myself, or if I heard that sudden death happened to others, but especially when I thought of myself that I must quickly come to judgment.
And could you at any time with ease get off the guilt of sin, when by any of these ways it came upon you?
No, not I, for then they got faster hold of my conscience, and then, if I did but think of going back to sin, though my mind was turned against it would be double torment to me.
And how did you do then?
I thought I must endeavour to mend my life, for else, thought I am sure to be lost forever.
And did you endeavour to mend?
Yes, and fled from not only my sins, but sinful company too, and betook me to religious duties, as praying, reading, weeping for sin, speaking truth to my neighbours, etc. These things did I, with many others, too much here to tell.
And did you think yourself well then?
Yes, for a while, but at the last my trouble came tumbling upon me again, and that over the neck of all my trying to do right.
How came that about, since you were now doing right, as far as you knew?
There were several things brought it upon me, especially such sayings as these: all our righteousness are as filthy rags. By the works of the law shall no flesh be made righteous. When ye shall have done all these things which are commanded you, say, we are unprofitable, with many more such like. From whence I began to reason with myself thus: if all my righteousness are filthy rags, if by the deeds of the law no man can be made righteous, and if, when we have done all, we are yet unprofitable, then it is but a folly to think of heaven by the law. I further thought thus: if a man runs 100 pounds into the shopkeeper's debt, and after that shall pay for all that he shall buy, yet his old debt stands still in the book uncrossed, for the which the shopkeeper may sue him, and cast him into prison till he shall pay the debt.
Well, and how did you apply this to yourself?
Why, I thought thus with myself: I have by my sins run a great way into God's book, and my now reforming will not pay off that score. Therefore I should think still, under all my present trying. But how shall I be freed from that punishment that I have brought myself in danger of by my former sins?
A very good application, but pray go on.
Another thing that hath troubled me ever since my late turning from sin is, that if I look narrowly into the best of what I do now, I still see sin, new sin, mixing itself with the best of that I do. So that now I am forced to conclude that, notwithstanding my former fond opinion of myself and duties, I have committed sin enough in one duty to send me to hell, though my former life had been faultless.
And what did you do then?
Do? I could not tell what to do, till I brake my mind to Faithful, for he and I were well acquainted, and he told me that unless I could obtain the righteousness of a man that had never sinned, neither mine own nor in all the righteousness of the world could save me.
And did you think he spake true?
Had he told me so when I was pleased and satisfied with mine own trying, I had called him fool for his pains. But now, since I see mine own weakness and the sin which cleaves to my best performance, I have been forced to be of his opinion.
But did you think, when at first he suggested it to you, that there was such a man to be found, of whom it might justly be said that he never committed sin?
I must confess the words at first sounded strangely, but after a little more talk and company with him, I had a full certainty about it.
And did you ask him what man this was, and how you must be made righteous by him?
Yes, And he told me it was the Lord Jesus, that dwelleth on the right hand of the Most High. And thus, said he, you must be made right by him, even by trusting what he hath done by himself in the days of his flesh, and suffered when he did hang on the tree. I asked him further, how that man's righteousness could be of that power to help another before God. And he told me he was the mighty God, and did what he did, and died the death also, not for himself, but for me, to whom his doings and the worthiness of them should be given, if I believed on him.
And what did you do then?
I made my objections against my believing, for that I thought he was not willing to save me.
And what said Faithful to you then?
He bid me go to him and see. Then I said it was too much for me to ask for. But he said no, for I was invited to come. Then he gave me a book of Jesus' own writing, to encourage me the more freely to come. And he said concerning that book, that every word and letter thereof stood firmer than heaven and earth. Then I asked him what I must do when I came, and he told me I must entreat on my knees with all my heart and soul the Father to reveal him to me. Then I asked him further how I must make my prayer to him. And he said, go, and thou shalt find him upon a mercy seat, where he sits all the year long to give pardon and forgiveness to them that come. I told him that I knew not what to say when I came, and he bid me say to this effect, God be merciful to me a sinner, and make me to know and believe in Jesus Christ. For I see that if his righteousness had not been, or I have not faith in that righteousness, I am utterly cast away. Lord, I have heard that thou art a merciful God, and hast given that thy Son Jesus Christ should be the Saviour of the world, and moreover that thou art willing to bestow him upon such a poor sinner as I am. And I am a sinner indeed. Lord, take therefore this opportunity, and show thy grace in the salvation of my soul, through thy Son Jesus Christ. Amen.
And did you do as you were bidden?
Oh, yes, over and over and over.
And did the Father show his Son to you?
Not at the first, nor second, nor third, nor fourth, nor fifth, no, nor at the sixth time neither.
What did you do then?
What? Why, I could not tell what to do.
Had you no thoughts of leaving off praying?
Oh yes, 100 times, twice told.
And what was the reason you did not?
I believed that that was true which had been told to me, to wit, that without the righteousness of this Christ, all the world could not save me. And therefore, thought I with myself, if I leave off, I die, and I can but die at the throne of grace. And withal, this came into my mind, though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. So I continued praying until the Father showed me his Son.
And how was he shown unto you?
I did not see him with my bodily eyes, but with the eyes of my heart, and thus it was. One day I was very sad, I think sadder than at any one time in my life, and this sadness was through a fresh sight of the greatness and vileness of my sins. And, as I was then looking for nothing but hell and the everlasting loss of my soul, suddenly, as I thought, I saw the Lord Jesus look down from heaven upon me, and saying, Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and thou shalt be saved. But I replied, Lord, I am a very great sinner. And he answered, My grace is sufficient for thee. Then I said, But Lord, what is believing? And then I saw from that saying, He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst. That believing and coming was all one, and that he that came, that is, ran out in his heart and desire after salvation by Christ, he indeed believed in Christ. Then the water stood in mine eyes, and I asked further, But Lord, may such a great sinner as I am be indeed accepted of thee, and be saved by thee? And I heard him say, And him that cometh to me I will in no wise cast out. Then said I, But how, Lord, must I consider of thee in my coming to thee, that my faith may be placed aright upon thee? Then he said, Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners. He is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believes. He died for our sins and rose again for our righteousness. He loved us and washed us from our sins in his own blood. He is mediator between God and us. He ever liveth to plead for us. From all which I gathered that I must look for righteousness in his person, and for satisfaction for my sins by his blood. that what he did in obedience to his Father's law, and in submitting to the penalty thereof, was not for himself, but for him that will accept it for his salvation, and be thankful. And now was my heart full of joy, mine eyes full of tears, and mine affections running over with love to the name, people, and ways of Jesus Christ.
This was a revelation of Christ to your soul indeed, but tell me particularly what effect this had upon your spirit.
It made me see that all the world, notwithstanding all the righteousness thereof, is in a state of condemnation. It made me see that God the Father, though he be just, can justly forgive the coming sinner. It made me greatly ashamed of the vileness of my former life, and confounded me with the sense of my own ignorance. For there never came thought into my heart before now that showed me so the beauty of Jesus Christ. It made me love a holy life, and long to do something for the honor and glory of the name of the Lord Jesus. Yea, I thought that, had I now 1,000 gallons of blood in my body, I could spill it all for the sake of the Lord Jesus.
End of Part 1, Chapter 9.